Evan learned early how to show up, not in a heroic way, there were no speeches or medals, but in the quiet, dependable way that left no record. He woke before his alarm most mornings, lay still, until the grey light settled into the room, and then stood up. Coffee, toast, keys. The ritual felt less like discipline and more like gravity. At work, Evan's name sat in the middle of an organizational chart that never seemed to change. He processed invoices, answered emails that required careful politeness, and fixed small errors before they became larger ones. He never called in sick, not because he was especially healthy, but because it didn't occur to him to do otherwise. When he had a cold, he brought tissues. When he had a headache, he drank more water. His co-workers noticed this only in passing, the way you notice a clock that keeps good time. At lunch, he walked to the same bench behind the building, where a thin maple grew out of a square of dirt. He ate slowly, listening to the traffic and the hum of the city moving without him. Sometimes he thought about the sketchbook tucked away in his closet, the one he hadn't opened in years. He had once believed drawing would be his life. Now it felt more like a former address, still meaningful, but no longer where he lived. After work, Evan stopped by his mother's apartment twice a week. He fixed loose cabinet handles and replaced light bulbs. She offered him tea and asked about his day. He told her small, true things. She told him stories he already knew, adding new details as if the past itself was still under construction. When he left, she pressed leftovers into his hands, and he felt something settle inside him, a sense of being needed that didn't ask for explanations. On Thursdays, he met his friend Mark for dinner. Mark talked about promotions, investments, the feeling that time was either racing or standing still. Evan listened, nodded, asked questions. Sometimes Mark asked Evan what he wanted. Evan smiled and said he was doing okay. It wasn't a lie exactly. It just wasn't the whole sentence. There were evenings when Evan came home and sat on the edge of his bed, shoes still on, wondering how a life could feel both full and unfinished. He thought about calling in sick, not from work, but from the steady expectations of being reliable, agreeable, present. He imagined a day spent doing nothing useful, just walking and thinking and letting himself drift. The thought brought a small, surprising relief. One Saturday, he woke with a stiffness in his chest that wouldn't quite fade. It wasn't pain, just a weight. He stood in the kitchen holding his mug, watching steam rise and disappear. For the first time, he considered staying home on a weekday, calling his supervisor and saying simply, "I need a day." The idea felt both rebellious and reasonable. He didn't do it. Instead, he reached into the closet and pulled out the sketchbook. The paper smelled faintly of dust. He sat at the table and drew the mug in his hand. The crack in the wall, the light on the floor. The drawings weren't impressive, but they were attentive. He felt himself slow down, as if his thoughts had finally matched his breathing. From then on, Evan drew on weekends, not with a plan or a goal, but as a way of noticing. He drew his mother's hands as she folded laundry, Mark's expressive gestures mid-story, the maple tree behind his office in different seasons. The sketchbook filled gradually like a quiet conversation. Nothing else changed dramatically. Evan still went to work. He still never called in sick. But something had shifted almost imperceptibly. He felt less like he was carrying his life and more like he was walking alongside it. One morning, months later, Evan woke with a real fever. His head ached, his throat burned. He sat on the edge of the bed, considering his options. After a moment, he picked up his phone and sent a brief message to his supervisor. Then he lay back down. As the day passed, he slept and woke and slept again. Outside, the world kept moving. Inside, Evan rested, unafraid that everything would fall apart without him. He thought about the man he had been and the one he was becoming. Not different in any dramatic way, just a little more honest. When he returned to work the next day, nothing had changed, and somehow that was enough.